it's not all about, oh, well, these bad things happen and something sweeps in and solves the situation, because actually bad things do continue to happen. And I don't want to do any spoilers, but there are some points in the book where people go, oh gosh, wasn't expecting that.
Yes.
But good things do come along, those breaks do actually happen. And those are the kind of things that I draw upon my policing experience for actually examples where something bad has happened to somebody, but they do get a break and they can turn themselves around. And I've seen that happen a lot, people turning themselves around after bad things.
Hello and welcome to Beneath the Page, the podcast about books and the authors behind them. I'm Sophie Beal.
And I'm Steve Couch. And we're joined today by a guest author, a debut author whose first book, a multi-generational family saga called Under the Hickory Tree, came out in June of this year. She's also a former police superintendent, which we're going to get onto. I think there's some interesting stuff to explore there. Jo Chinn, welcome to the podcast. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you very much. Delighted to be here.
Brilliant. Well, before you were a published writer, as we said, you had a long career in the police. How does that background impact on the work you're doing now as a writer?
Well, in Under the Hickory Tree, there are actually a couple of characters who are police officers.
Yes.
So clearly I can draw upon my experiences to create a sort of a realism around those characters. But being a police officer for 30 years, you do get to see an awful lot of life.
Yeah.
And it does inform the way you write. But people often ask me, as a police officer, why don't you write crime? And everybody expects me to write crime and
that was
thrillers.
the next question.
And this is just a personal thing, and I completely get that people love crime thrillers.
Yeah.
But for me, I've seen a lot of crime, and I've seen the effects of real crime, and it's not fun, it's not entertaining, and being a victim of crime is not enjoyable. In books, criminals are often intriguing characters, and they're sort of interesting. Real criminals aren't. And I wanted to write something completely different. And I think that in the current environment where there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure, and that the world is a place with a lot of troubles going on, I wanted to write something that was more entertaining and more enjoyable, and had a message of hope. And actually, Under the Hickory Tree, I think this is a book where an awful lot of bad things happen to good people. And to start with, you might be thinking, oh, this is a bit of a misery fest. Do stick with it.
Yes.
Because actually the end message is a message of hope.
Very much so. And actually, all the way through, people get themselves into terrible situations, but they have an awful lot of breaks, don't they? A lot of grace.
Yes, absolutely. And it's not all about, oh, well, these bad things happen and something sweeps in and solves the situation, because actually bad things do continue to happen. And I don't want to do any spoilers, but there are some points in the book where people go, oh gosh, wasn't expecting that.
Yes.
But good things do come along, those breaks do actually happen. And those are the kind of things that I draw upon my policing experience for actually examples where something bad has happened to somebody, but they do get a break and they can turn themselves around. And I've seen that happen a lot, people turning themselves around after bad things. So again, that comes from my policing background.
That's such a positive thing to say.
Well, doesn't happen all of the time, but of course it does happen.
Yeah.
So Under the Hickory Tree is your first published novel. When did you start writing?
Well, I actually only started writing in 2022 because I joined the police in 1988. And it's one of those jobs that is very all-encompassing. You don't sort of do it and just go home at the end of the day and it's something that you can put away. You do very, very long hours, you work weekends, you do quick changeovers, which is shifts that, where there's not a lot of break between one shift and another. And it takes over your whole life. It really is a career that's all-encompassing. So I didn't read very much. I certainly didn't have any interests or hobbies. You couldn't get into a hobby because you never knew whether you were going to be able to follow it through. You're always getting called in, weekends cancelled, public order situations arise and your time off is taken away. Policing isn't creative. it's all about rules and regulations and policy and procedure and law and legislation, and you've got to follow, you know, the way of doing things. There's not a lot of scope for creativity in policing. So when I left, I had this urge to do creative things, and this was in 2015. So you might ask yourself, well, what did you do for 7 years? Because you didn't start writing till 2022. And I tried cake decorating, and I took up dressmaking, and I did photography. And I did pottery. Pottery was lovely.
That does sound good.
Pottery.
Did you get a wheel?
I went to a place where I used their stuff, all with varying degrees of success. I'm actually quite a good photographer, but I'm a rubbish dressmaker. Rubbish. So I tried all these various things, and I didn't feel like I'd landed on the thing. One day, my husband was crawling around in the loft, as you do. He'd found in the loft one of my old school exercise books, and it was my English exercise book. And he said, I've been flicking through this, he said, and it's all these, you were like 15, there's all these stories in here that you wrote in your exercise book from school. He said, and they're great. He said, and you're such a words person, you know, you're such a wordsmith. You love the crossword and you love etymology, and I do speak a couple of languages, or I used to speak a couple of languages. So language is something that fascinates me. He said, why don't you do a creative writing course? And I was like, and he's a real do-it-now person. Yeah. And within half an hour, he'd gone online, found a course, and I was signed up to it.
Brilliant.
Literally a do-it-now person.
Literally a do-it-now person, yeah.
So it's all down to your husband?
Pretty much, yeah, actually, you could say that, because he found a really good course for me. He didn't sort of faff around. I mean, he went to the top. It was an online 10-week course with Oxford University.
Right.
And it was the basic creative writing course, which I enjoyed immensely. That was when I sort of felt, I think I found my tribe here.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
This is the creative outlet I was looking for. But at the end of the 10-week course, I had ideas and imagination and things that hadn't occurred to me before. I always thought of myself actually as unimaginative, and so I never ever dreamed I would write a book, because although I love my words, I didn't think I had the imagination to create the stories. And it was the course that gave me the tools that triggered an imagination that I didn't realise that I had.
And at what point did you start thinking, actually I could get published here?
Oh, that's a tricky one really. I mean, but interestingly, I did actually write Under the Hickory Tree
Wow.
thinking that it was just a practice run for writing my policing autobiography. I mean, how naive is that? You know, I'll write this book to practice.
I have to say, it's far too good to just be a practice run.
Yeah. Started off using some scenes and some stuff that we'd created on the course. But I started to invest, and invest in the characters and invest in the plot. And once that investment had started, and the imagination was firing, I realised that actually I needed to write this book for the sake of the book, rather than as a trial run. And actually I've decided I'm not going to do the policing autobiography, because this is so much more enjoyable doing this stuff. And I don't want to dig into that past.
Yeah. No. Let's focus a bit more on Under the Hickory Tree now. And having said you don't want to focus on the past, I'm going to ask a question that does both.
Okay,
so,
we'll go with it.
There is a scenario in the book, and I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to plot spoil, where there's a fairly large-scale police operation. We see it from both sides. We see it from the police side. We also see it from the side of the group of people who are being policed. How challenging was it for you to write that from their perspective rather than the one that you were more familiar with? Your police background doesn't make it police good, protesters bad. There's no sense.
Thank you. That's good to know, actually, really good to know, because I didn't want it to be very policey and very dominant, because very often there are two sides to every. In fact, there's always two sides to every. There's two perspectives, and often both perspectives are legitimate. It's just where two aims collide. And I wanted to be sympathetic to the protesters, but I kind of injected a little bit of humour into it as well, because I do like a little bit of humour every so often. And a couple of the characters, which is Digger and his girlfriend Sycamore, they're lying in their sort of roundhouse, you know, and the djembe drums are beating outside. And she's like, you know, I'm glad all these people have arrived to help us, but these bloody djembe drums are driving me around the twixt. And so, I wanted to put the humanity into the characters as well. Yeah. So that's hopefully what's happened. Excellent. So towards the end of the book, this scene occurs, and the character is Hugh, and he's a public order chief inspector. And when I was in the police, one of the functions that I did, it wasn't my day job, but one of the additional skills I had was I was a public order trained officer. And I was part of the London riots, the command team for that. And I've been part of the command team for a lot of major public events, at the Olympics and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee, as well as lots of spontaneous disorder. And I've done that job so many times. I've been in that carrier. I've been in my public order uniform. You know, I've made those decisions about, do we wear NATO helmets or do we wear flat caps? Because what are the optics, but what are the health and safety concerns? So this stuff was just bread and butter for me. It was really, really easy. That particular situation is a group of people living in woodland, and they want to preserve that woodland. Now, that is something that I would have an affinity with anyway. I would want to be protecting those trees from being chopped down for a railway. And actually, often in policing, you do find yourself having not compromised, but being in that situation where you've got divided loyalties. And this is where Hugh finds himself in that situation. Hugely divided loyalties. But he is a professional and he is paid to do that job, and he has got to do that job, despite his own personal views. And actually, I drew upon my experiences from Wanstead Flats. Now, I don't know whether you remember this, it was early 90s. It was one of the earliest mass protests about obstructing an infrastructure project. And do you remember Swampy?
Oh, yes.
Swampy was Wanstead Flats. Now, I was part of the policing for Wanstead Flats. And this was the first time we'd actually really, or certainly in my experience, it was the first time we'd come across a group of very dedicated people who wanted, you know, for really good reasons, to stop that road from going through. Got a little fun fact here. Can I check a fun fact here?
Please do.
So when I was writing this, Hugh's assistant is in policing terms, they're called a runner. And that's the person who helps you with your logs and goes and troubleshoots issues for you, and they're your runner, and they're your right hand man or woman. Can be either right hand person. Can be either right hand person. Hugh obviously was going to have a runner, and it was just such a no-brainer of the name of this runner. I called him Sergeant Stuart Wilson. I actually had 2 runners, both called Sergeant Stuart Wilson, and it could not be anybody else. And the sad thing is, the real Stuart Wilson don't know that they've got a cameo in my book.
Oh, that's very sad.
Because I've lost touch with them since I retired, and they don't know. So I'm kind of hoping that somehow this reaches out to them. And somebody will tell Stuart Wilson.
If you're watching Stuart and Stuart, I think we need to get you together to fight it out for which one actually is getting the reference.
But yeah, Stuart Wilson he had to be. Couldn't be anybody else.
Where did the title Under the Hickory Tree come from?
So that goes back to the original course that I did.
Yes.
And the exercise was an exercise in creating a character. And I'd never created a character in my life before, apart from when I was 15 in my English books. And so I did this. And the first character I created was Greer Garland, who becomes the country and western superstar character. We then used them on the course to create a scene. So I invented this little scenario where this country and western character, is having an argument with her brother in the stables of the great big estate that she owns, because she's such a wealthy, successful person. And they're in the shade of this hickory tree. But for me, the hickory tree is actually quite symbolic. Trees and family are very, symbolic of each other. It seemed to me that the tree that started the very story, where the genesis of the whole story was, which is now incidentally chapter 35 in the book, it just felt right that it would represent the family story, as well as a key scene, which was where it all started.
And on the subject of family trees, something that I was profoundly grateful for was you put some family trees at the beginning of the book.
Yes.
There are a lot of characters, and there are times where it's really useful just to be able to flick back to the front and think, oh that's who that is. So thank you for that.
Well, absolutely, because the thing about family sagas is that they are epic, and they go across generations, and there's a lot of people in them. I know all of those characters quite intimately, so to me I'm thinking, it's not that confusing really, but it's a bit like knowing your own family and somebody else trying to know your own family.
I read a book recently that has a list of who all the characters are, but it's at the back of the book, so I didn't discover it
It's very
until
irritating.
until I'd finished the book, and it would have been so useful to know it was there.
I find that with things like the Lord of the Rings type stuff, there are so many characters in those, and they all start with the same letter, and they're all sort of interchangeable. So I struggle with those. So it was important to me that everybody knew who was who. And I love a family tree. I'm hugely into ancestry.
We're very grateful.
Under the Hickory Tree, it seems to me, is a book about guilt, and more precisely, it's a book about undeserved guilt and how we move past it. Would you say that's a fair assessment?
I'd say that's a very good assessment, actually, Steve. I would say that's part of the nucleus of the book. It's not just about when bad things happen to good people, but it's about how you deal with that when that happens. And in the book, bad things happen to a range of people, but they deal with it differently and get different outcomes.
I know I'm talking to a former police officer, but what would you say guilt means to you?
It's something that people carry with them for a lifetime, and usually guilt is unexpressed. People don't go around talking about their guilty feelings. It's something that's personal to the individual.
Yeah.
Yes.
Guilt is something you can't resolve, because once you've resolved it, you're no longer guilty. And actually talking things through, even when bad things happen. I mean, this has happened to me in the past where I've done some things where I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to take that to my grave. When you actually open up and talk about it, as long as it's not going to be harmful to anybody else, you can take the sting out of it. But the problem with guilt is that people don't talk about the thing that they feel guilty of. And that's what happens here. The character Bryn, he gets involved in a very tragic situation very early on. It's a sort of the action that kickstarts everything. And he carries that guilt with him to his grave.
And there's a real theme of history repeating itself, isn't there?
That's a subject that I really like, because when I go through my sort of ancestry research, you do see things sort of cropping up time and time again. And I'd like to say I actually haven't discovered any massive secrets in my ancient family history, although there are some in my recent family history. And so although I've used what I've learned from ancestry to inform the writing of the book, particularly the lives of women.
Yes.
In times gone by, women had so many children.
Yes.
Families of 9 or 11 were not uncommon. And the matriarch of the story, Lowry, she's one of 9 children. She's the eldest of 9 children. And the children die. They die of terrible things. Tuberculosis was a common thing. And so I very much wanted to use my research to show people how tough women's lives really, really were. And things like the photographs that appear in the story. The photograph of Lowry is an actual description of a photograph that I've got in my box of family photos. And the photograph of Shirley's mum, who died in childbirth at 17, is actually a description of my grandparents' wedding photograph. And my nan did actually make her wedding outfit from the bell-bottom trousers of her husband's naval uniform.
And was she a better dressmaker than you?
She's a much better dressmaker, thankfully. She looks very smart in the photo. So the photographs that I'm referring to are real photographs.
Yes.
This is where I get my inspiration from. I like imagery. I like to look at things and think, right, what happened just before that photograph was taken? What happened just after that photo? What did they say to each other? Who was taking the photograph? And I like to think like that. And those are the things that fire my imagination.
Yes. I've just picked up on that. You've just mentioned you've had secrets in your more recent past.
Under the Hickory Tree is a book about family secrets, betrayal and redemption. And family secrets do fascinate me, as do coincidences. And people always say, oh, in literature there's always so many coincidences, and these coincidences don't really happen. But actually, I can say from personal experience that mind-blowing coincidences really do happen. My sister was a young mum, and she wasn't particularly well off, and she used to take in ironing. And she didn't move terribly far away from the area where we grew up, whereas I had moved away. She was visiting a lady, picking up some ironing and having a chat, as you do. And she happened to sort of say, oh, I grew up in this area, and back in those days my surname was Cornelius. And this lady, her face kind of froze a bit and she went slightly pale, and she said, so you lived around here, when you were growing up? I said, yeah. She said, I lived here with my sister and my parents. And the lady said, what was your father's name? And my father's name was Ralph Cornelia. So my sister told her, and the lady went 3 more shades of grey. And to cut a long story short, the lady had adopted a child. She hadn't been able to have children of her own, and her adoptive daughter had done some research into her own background and discovered that her father was Ralph Cornelius. And it gets you when you think of, my God, what an unbelievable coincidence that was. And this lady, who my sister took in ironing for, was the mother of my father's illegitimate daughter.
Goodness.
And this all came to light just around about the time that he was very, very unwell and he passed away. And she did come to his funeral, but there isn't a happy ending to this, because the schism between us, in that she was a product of an illicit relationship. My father had betrayed my mum. We couldn't put that behind us. There is a happy ending in that she's got a family of her own. My sister does keep in touch with her. But it wasn't a relationship that we were able to forge from that unhappy set of circumstances to begin with. But it shows you that families do have skeletons. And even when you think you're the most normal everyday family that there is, we're just completely regular, skeletons are there, and they can come out in the most amazing ways. Incredible coincidences.
Incredible.
One of the characters at one point makes the remark, men keeping awful secrets and women paying the price. Where have I heard that before? I can absolutely see where she's coming from in the book. Is that a little bit unfair on the men in the book as well? Because some of them pay a hefty price for the awful secrets that they keep. And although some of them keep awful secrets, by no means are all of them awful men.
No, in fact, most of the men keeping awful secrets are good guys.
Most of them.
And actually, they're keeping those awful secrets for good reasons, to protect their loved ones. But I think that the women pay the price as well. So although the secrets were Bryn's, they all paid the price for that. They didn't have the opportunity to know their full extended family. They didn't know their heritage. They didn't know their Welsh roots. And that was a terrible price to pay for what had happened to him. And he was just an innocent in all of this. A complete innocent. At no time does Bryn do anything bad for the sake of bad.
No,
all of the bad things that happened to him, and the bad things that he does, and that he does do some bad things,
are a response.
Yeah. Sophie and I were discussing this earlier. You know where I'm going at.
I do.
But I wouldn't say it was a bad thing on his part, but when he meets and falls in love with Gwenna, the thing that it seems to me first draws him to her is that she is the absolute likeness of the fiancée that he left behind when he fled the country.
Shirley.
Now, I want to know, is that a lovely, sweet, romantic thing? Or from Gwenna's point of view, if she knew that, isn't that a bit creepy? I fell for you because you remind me of my ex. You look like my ex.
Actually, if you read on a little bit, if you read on to the next chapter, he says, although her likeness was astonishing, the fluidity of her movements and her beautiful voice were absolutely her own.
Fair enough.
And he loved that. He loved
valid.
the way she moved. He loved the way she spoke.
So the initial appeal was, blimey, she looks like Shirley.
Exactly.
But
shock.
then he fell in love with her rather
in love.
than... Okay.
And it's that lovely Kentucky voice, the musical, melodical voice, the way she says, Riot and B, A and B. And I can't do that.
Well, talking of Gwenna, you have achieved a rare feat, and I want to doff my cap to you for this. You have referenced an obscure old school country musician that I was unaware of. I get caught out in many genres, but I didn't think old school country I would be caught out. I'd never heard of Bonnie Guitar. Could you explain why you chose her to be Gwenna's favourite musician?
I did a lot of research on virtually everything in the book, because I've written an awful lot about things that I know nothing about.
Which is really impressive, because you seemed like an expert on all of them.
I did pull quite a lot of 4 a.m. finishes on it. I was up all night going down rabbit holes and having a wonderful
stock car.
time.
Let's list them. There's stock car racing,
tobacco farming,
horses,
Trees,
coal mining, guitars,
life on an ocean.
I did a lot of
shipping.
research on merchant shipping.
Buenos Aires. You knew about Buenos Aires.
Drug cartels.
I know a little bit about that.
We're giving away the plot of the book here.
Sarajevo, the whole Bosnian Wars.
Yes.
I knew nothing about that, and actually one of the characters is an ex-military guy, American military guy who's fought in all the Gulf Wars.
Yes.
I researched all the Gulf Wars. I learned it was so interesting.
Do you enjoy all this research?
Absolutely love it. I almost enjoy the research more than the writing, quite frankly. So going back to the original question,
I'm sorry.
Bonnie Guitar.
which is Bonnie Guitar.
Sophie always wants to get us away from music.
I do.
I don't know how I stumbled across Bonnie Guitar, but it was part of my research into country and western of the 1960s. So everything had to be specific to the era in which the story was set.
Yes.
So I think I probably went online and Googled the American Top 100 1963 country and western charts. And Bonnie Guitar would probably have been on that list. And then what a name, Bonnie Guitar. It just leapt at me. And for the character to name her guitar, her precious guitar after his character, just seemed like a no-brainer. And once I'd found Bonnie Guitar, I then researched her and listened to all her tunes, and I read about her life story.
And the song Candy Apple Red.
Candy Apple Red is a true song. So yeah, I'm really interested that you've picked up on that, actually.
Oh,
I suppose you would do.
I'll always home in on the music questions, if only to irritate Sophie. Gwen is not the only character who music is really important to. What does music mean to you?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, actually, because I'm not musical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't play any instruments. I don't have a record collection, actually. But I think my life is punctuated by tunes. Every one of us, I think, we have a soundtrack to our own lives. Mm-hmm. And I've often spent time mentally composing, my top 10 favourite records of all time. And I can't do it. Each one of those amazing tracks that I conjure up that represents a part of my life stands, in its own merit. And how can you put one above another? Mm. So I do believe we all have a soundtrack, but it's so personal and so intimate to ourselves. It's impossible to share that and it's too big as well.
So Gwenna's guitar connects different generations of her family, and there's a really lovely moment when the guitar gets passed down.
Very symbolic moment.
Yes.
Very symbolic.
Where all her hopes and dreams are being passed on in the manifestation of the guitar.
Yeah, lovely moment.
Brings tears to my eyes.
Just thinking about it. And it's not the only significant heirloom in the book. For instance, Lowry's dad's watch. Are there any significant heirlooms in your family like that?
How about a gold watch? The gold watch in the story is a device. Because it really does drive, it feeds all the way through, and it has a significance at the end of the story. But I actually did inherit from my grandmother a gold watch that had been her grandmother's and had been passed down through the eldest daughter in the family. I'm not the eldest daughter in my family, it's actually my sister, but I was always considered the more sensible one and the one that was more likely to make sure it got passed on. And so, I inherited this beautiful little lady's gold watch from my grandmother's grandmother. And I've now passed it on to my eldest niece, who's going to pass it on to her daughter. And they've all got very strict instructions about how this happens. There are so few things that reach across the generations. When you think about all of our lives and the lives of our grandparents, what actually survives today of those lives? Very, very little. And what's going to survive of our lives in 100 years' time when our descendants are sort of thinking back about us? So the gold watch in the story was personally significant to me. And that whole concept of things being handed on really carries weight with me.
Yes. The dedication you put at the beginning of the book, you've dedicated it to your sister, and you said that she taught you how to read.
It is absolutely true. My sister's 6 years older than me, so she was 11 when I was 5. And we used to play school, and she did teach me to read and to write. So when I started at primary school, I had those skills already. It was a head start that has stayed with me throughout my life. Although I went into policing, the ability to take an amazing statement, or the ability to write really good evidence, or even later on, I used my writing skills. I was a mentor for other people coming up through the promotion channels, and I coached people on how to write a good promotion application form, and so I have used my writing skills, and they've undoubtedly given me an advantage throughout the whole of my life, and that goes right back to those early preschool lessons. So it was a no-brainer that I would
Yeah.
be dedicating my book to my sister.
What does family mean to you?
And family is everything, isn't it? You know, it's who we are, it's where we've come from. And my family tree goes back to 1420.
Wow.
Really?
And I look at those people, and I think every one of those people on that tree made me.
Is that why, or is that part of why you felt driven to write a book that was so centred on the impact of family?
Do you know, I didn't realise I've always had a bit of a family thing. I sat and wrote a list of the books that have been important to me over the course of my life. And books like Roots,
Yes.
and books like The Thornbirds, and books like The Godfather. These are books that have resonated with me over the years. And when I finished with my list of 10 books, almost all of them were family sagas. And I hadn't realised that I have always been drawn
Yes.
to these big epic tales. I mean, Roots is a family saga.
Yes.
The Godfather is a family saga.
suppose
And
it
actually, it's at this point where I like to sort of feel the need to defend family saga as a genre, because it's become a bit old-fashioned. People think of it as cosy, pipe and slippers type stuff.
Well, we deliberately jump from genre to genre with this podcast. We don't stick to a narrow thing. And you are our second author of a family saga.
Ah, right. That's
So-
interesting to know. That's
so
good. I'd like
there
to.
are others out there.
Yeah, I want to bring it back, because
Yes.
we've all got families. We've all got family histories. You know, though the past that makes us who we are is fascinating. And I think everybody can associate with that.
Yes.
Yes.
And so bringing the family saga genre back, especially at a time when we're looking for hope and optimism, and we're looking
Yes.
to find out who we are.
Yes.
And things like Game of Thrones. Well, that's a
Yes.
family saga. So it is still popular.
Yes.
There is still a demand for it. It's a bit like people who write romantic stuff. They always feel the need to defend, you know, the rom-com, because it's a little bit of a derogatory...
And yet it's so difficult to create a good rom-com.
Right.
Hugh Grant will tell you that the number of scripts he turns down because they just aren't funny.
And I think that's the thing with any genre. Good writing is good writing.
Yes.
And
So yeah, I want to stand up and wave the flag for
Family
for
sagas.
family saga.
Well, good on you.
Thank you.